All right, welcome folks. Thanks for being here, and we'll let people stream in. And welcome to the podcast on This Clinical Life. I'm incredibly excited about the story we're telling today. I had a chance to meet Stephanie Abbott again just a few months ago and told the story that sort of rocked me in terms of why we do what we do. And I thought, she's got to tell her story in every place she can. So honored to have her here. My name is Stephen Beeson. I am a family medicine physician, born and raised in broadcasting from San Diego, where it's pouring right now. We're countering our drought sort of as we speak. And father of two. We have two puppies that may be running behind me here in a little bit. But again, Stephanie Abbott, thanks for being here. And I appreciate you being a guest on This Clinical Life.
Well, I am excited to be here and humbled for the opportunity.
Awesome. So before we dive into, the story that, again, rocked my world, tell us, who is Stephanie? What's your story?
So yes, my name is Stephanie Abbott, and I've been in healthcare now for 14 years. I've had the privilege to work for some amazing organizations. I've worked for Adventist Health, HCA, Intermountain Healthcare, and I did a 13-week contract for Providence out in California. My background is in human resources and consumer experience, and it's just been a whirlwind over the past few years with all the changes and learning how to do things more virtually, for example. I also love the water. I am a beach baby in a secret life, or in another life, I think I was a mermaid, but people probably laugh at me when I say that. I love boating, again, being on the water. And most important, I am a wife to an amazing man. And I have two beautiful children, a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old that keep me quite busy.
Those are dynamic ages where completing conversations and sentences doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
All right, somebody's always chasing somebody, right, in terms of managing the 2 and 6-year-old demographic. So it's funny, before I have you tell your story, that we think our life is going to be one thing and it ends up being something entirely different. Right? I mean, we get these radical events, good, bad, ugly, different, tragic, glorious, whatever. Life is just it's a set of circumstances that we don't know are coming. And that certainly happened with you. So with that as sort of a context a little bit, tell us your story in terms of what you're beginning to share with the world. And we would also love to know what inspired you to turn on the light and tell your story in terms of what it was like to be in healthcare in an entirely different way.
Yeah, and that's a really good way to prove or to talk about it. So I think I'm going to have to record that and copyright it. Right? That's a really good way. So in December 2020, I had my son. December 17th, one of the best days of my life. And about 6 weeks later, as a woman, you go in for your postpartum checkup, and everything was good to go. It was like completely normal. In April, May, I noticed that I had a bump in my right breast. Didn't really think anything of it, because after you have a baby, things are lumpy. They're not as normal as they used to be. And you just cross your fingers and pray that everything goes back to normal, right? So I didn't think anything of it. And at that time, that's when Adventist Health had recruited me and had just presented an offer to come work at the amazing organization. So I ended up moving from Florida to California. And once I started this amazing job, reporting to an amazing leader with a great team, I noticed the bump had gotten a little bit bigger. So again, being in a brand new state, I had no physicians, lined up, didn't have, primary care set up. So I ended up meeting with a GYN doctor and had her look at the bump. And she was just like, yeah, it's a little suspicious. Like, let's go get it checked out. So October was when I actually got the mammography. They looked at the mammo and they're like, oh yeah, we need to biopsy that. So then we did a biopsy, another mammo. And then on November 12th, I got the call that no woman ever wants to hear. You have breast cancer. And I remember I was sitting in my office when I got the call, which they tell you have breast cancer over the phone. Interesting topic that maybe we come back to for later. But I just remember my the earth coming out from underneath me. And I was like, okay, my day is obviously ending. And so I just ran home and I remember falling into my husband's arms and just crying. Like, I'm too young for this. I'm 37 years old. Like, this doesn't happen to me, right? It's just like you go through all these series of emotions. And so it was about a week, 2 weeks later that I actually got my first appointment with a surgical oncologist. And here at this appointment, they started to tell me about what I had to go through, all these hoops I had to go through in order to start to get answers. There was like 11 different hoops. I had to get an MRI, an ultrasound. I had to meet with an oncologist, a radiation oncologist. You either need a PET scan or a bone scan. Meet with a plastic surgeon. You need labs and EKG. You need to meet with a PCP. Oh yeah, and by the way, you need to get genetic testing. And so being a healthcare executive and knowing all of this, I'm like, sometimes we have access issues with this. Like, we're busy. Like, how long is it going to take me to get through all these hoops before I even know what's going on, right? So one of my physician's appointment that I met with was the second surgical oncologist, which she was able to paint a picture that says, Stephanie, this is going to be a tough year for you. You're going to lose your hair. Your nails might fall out. Your skin is going to age. And for anybody that knows me, if I have any friends on the call that are probably laughing right now, they're like, oh, that girl loves her hair, right? Like, I love my hair. And so the fact that I was going to lose everything that I've taken care of, and I really enjoy my feminism, that was all going to be stripped away from me. And all I could think about was that I was going to look like one of those Sphinx cats run around the house in the breast cancer pink color, right? Like, I remember my cat died 1 month after my son was born. And so we want to get a new cat. And I saw this Sphinx cat and I showed my daughter, and my daughter's like, oh, mommy, that cat she's scary. Please don't get that kitty. And I'm like, that's what your mom's going to look like for like the next few years. Like, I was really worried about it. And thank God, I found more of a purpose to kind of get over those self-confidence issues of facing cancer. Once I started to go through the journey, starting to meet with subject matter expert after subject matter expert, 46 days went by. 46 days with absolutely no answers. It didn't matter what doctor or what clinician I spoke to. Nobody could give me a definite plan of what was going on with me. 46 days of absolute emotional suffering of not knowing if I was going to live or die. I remember sitting there and I was putting away the fall decorations and starting to get out the Christmas decorations. And I thought about writing my husband a note. And being 37 years old and questioning your own mortality and writing the man you love a note that says, don't forget me. Don't let the kids forget me. Because I didn't know what was going on. And for 46 days, it was like this battle that my husband and I were just going through on our own, trying to figure out what was going to happen with me. And so I ended up calling one of my girlfriends who had gone through this about 10 years prior. And, I was just poured out to her, right? I was crying, and then, she makes me laugh. And she goes, Stephanie, think about who you are, your drive, your experience in healthcare, how you want to make a difference. Why wouldn't God choose you for this? You're like the perfect person to go through this. I was like, the perfect person for cancer? Really? But then I started to think about, what? I want to survive. I will survive. I'm going to thrive in this space. And then after this, I want to make a difference for millions of people. And so that's where I really found my purpose. And so what I started to go through then was, how can I go through this approach through the lens of an executive and a patient? So there's lots of things we do in healthcare to make ourselves efficient, so that we have specific workflows and we do things to reduce waste. Well, all these things impact the patient and sometimes create friction. And so it creates an opportunity for us to do things differently so that people and processes act properly. And that's what gave me my purpose through this. And from there, I decided, you know what? We're just going to disrupt this market. We are not going to keep doing the things that we've always done. We need to really challenge that status quo, because we're running out of staff and the staff that we have are tired. So we really have to challenge ourselves and really understand the way that experiences are understood, and then apply that improvement so that we can create a frictionless environment for the patients that we serve and the employees that give us so many hours of their lives.
Well, I don't even know where to begin. I can only imagine what that was like going back in time in terms of getting that phone call. And the only thing I can equate it to was, there was a time when my son was 2, he had some persistent adenopathy, and we did a smear evaluation, and the oncologist said, I think it's leukemia. And so when you said your earth pulled out from underneath you, and your breath is taken, and you're like in this warp of, is this real? I can just envision what that must have been like for you. And then to have to wait a couple of weeks to see anybody, and then to have to wait another 46 days. If you look at that 46-day journey before, a therapeutic intervention begins, what were your top learnings in terms of how we need to do care differently for those that are suffering new and potentially life-threatening illnesses, or really, quite frankly, any illness? What would you guide and advise American healthcare as to how we might be able to do this better and differently?
So there's so many different things. And I really think that through what I've learned through this experience, in which I started to shift my organization, was really to stop looking at the data and really look at your qualitative information that you're getting from your patient. So those patient comments that you get, and really trying to make sense of that. Additionally, is how often do you actually walk the patient's journey to look at where those frictions end, from the time that they activate with us and they become aware, and then they actually have an episode of care, to that post-relational piece. There's so many touch points with the patient that we don't always revisit to look if those processes are still working. So that would be some of my opportunities to, for challenges for us to look at. There was when I first started trying to get care, it almost felt like ping pong between different providers' offices. And then there was different barriers to entry. They'd be like, oh, well, insurance has to approve this, or we're not taking new patients, or we are taking new patients, but only if you see our primary care physician. And it was like, hold on a second, like every day that goes by, I'm dying. And I don't know what's going on, and I need you. And I remember being on the phone with someone who was just like, oh, we'll call back in 7 to 10 days. And I was like, well, hopefully I'm not dying. And it was just complete silence. She didn't know how to react to that. And, there probably is not that part of scripting or training that you get. But it was just it felt like I was a number, which, oh, by the way, I was given a tracking number. So now I'm a UPS package going through the system versus being the human that I am. And so I really think taking a step back to understand how those experiences are understood, because you can greatly reduce that friction to create value and ROI for your organization.
Well, I have to, I can't help but look at the comments on, we had one of our attendees, Dana, who says she's in a very similar story. And I think that, I think breast cancer is sort of a proxy for what needs to change in healthcare, because, as you can attest, as Dana can attest, as our next door neighbor, my wife's best friend can attest, it's a disease that comes in all sorts of different ways and spares almost no one in terms of where it lands and how it acts after the diagnosis. So, and I think it's a real strong call to action for us to do things different in terms of not assigning tracking numbers. I want to ask you a little bit about the harvesting of qualitative story to inspire different interactions as patients go through the journey of care. And I'm sure you've had some interactions with care that gave you hope and confidence and a sense that, I'm in the right place, getting the right care. And these people and these teams are amazing, and I can sleep at night. And there are other moments that render different emotions. Talk a little bit about what those moments were, what made what, and what the downstream impact of those moments were for you, good and bad.
So, we focus so much on the data, right? And people are just like, we're improving or we're not improving. But really, it's like this low-hanging fruit that we could really focus on that would make such a bigger difference. And that's looking at that qualitative piece. When I was working, when I work with teams to do process improvement, what I try to do is inspire people to do the right thing instead of making them too scared to do the wrong thing. Because what we tend to do in healthcare is we play whack-a-mole with people. I love that term, whack-a-mole, because that's really what we do when faced with improvement. So I would challenge teams to look at your things that are going right and try to replicate those, learn from your staff. I was talking to a physician the other day, and I had said, hey, I went to a leadership meeting and I was talking about improving healthcare. And they're like, well, hopefully they listen to you, because they don't listen to us. And all they do is implement processes, and we're expected to abide. And I sat there and I thought, hey, like, how awful is that? And I can't believe this physician just told me this, but that's what we do. Like, there was this, I saw this meme, and I love memes. Maybe that's the millennial in me, but I've been told I'm a good millennial. So there was this meme that said, like, management knows 5% or sees 5% of the problems, right? It was like the igloo, or half of it was out of the water and the rest of it was underwater. And then it said supervisors see 50%, and it goes down. And then it says staff sees 100% of the problems. But sometimes it's the 5% that are making the changes, right? Or the strategy, the hippo in the room, highest paid person's opinion, versus really getting down to let the staff fix the problem. And so that's really with my approach too, is I create the swim lane for teams to say, here's where we need to go, and here's the resources we have to do it, but how do we fix it? And give them the empowerment to fix it themselves. I think on top of that too, there's the tactics matter in a sense that they create the foundation for what we do, right? So when you look at typical patient experience tactics, they're important. A lot of them create safety, right? And then they create a better experience. But what really made such a difference to me was when people created a human to human connection that created hope within inside me. There was 2 nurses that come to mind. The first one, so when I saw the first surgical oncologist, she asked me this question. She's just like, what can I do for you today? And it was like one of those things that's on an action plan on a bulletin board somewhere, right? Like, she needed to say it. And I remember looking at her and saying, I need you to tell me that I'm not going to die. You know what her response was? We're all going to die. Not the type of validation I need, right? Or the humor that I need in the moment. She ended up leaving, after the rest of our consultation, and the nurse came in and she sat down and she put her arm on my shoulder. No, this one actually grabbed my hand. She was holding my hand and she said, Stephanie, you're not going to die from this. And this complete stranger created trust in an instant, right? Because she was able to reduce my anxiety. There was another nurse named Berlin, hope she's fine with me saying how amazing she is, at my plastic surgeon's office, who, when I was going through talking about everything that I was going to lose, right, after my surgery, she sat down and she said, Stephanie, I want you to know that you have the cancer that you would want if you have to have breast cancer. And that's such a weird way of saying it, but it calmed me down in the sense that I could then hear everything else that needed to occur going forward. And she inspired hope. I don't know how to measure hope. I'm assuming that comes from looking at our qualitative metrics, looking at customer ease, looking at that. But we haven't figured out how to do that yet.
Well, there's a couple of things that that were very compelling. I mean, a lot of things you said were incredibly compelling. The first was, how do we pass and delegate power to our teams who are at the motor end plate of healthcare to innovate around who and what we are. And, for example, I'm envisioning, you or thousands of others that have compelling stories of what it's like to be a patient and who you are and what you hope to be in life, and your kids and your hopes and dreams and ambitions and history, all the things that make Stephanie, and every person that we treat that person, and they tell their story of and the impact that disease has had on them, this new diagnosis. And so to tell that to teams, to tell a story of the impact of illness on a particular patient, and to allow that team to say, based upon what you know and what you've heard and what we aspire to be and what I aspire to be, what do you think is our best approach in terms of how we manage patients collectively? That room is going to be so emotionally committed to doing the right thing. They will hold each other accountable because this is what we must do. And if leaders can just release the reins of power and allow teams to self-organize around high impact, compassionate, difference-making human connectivity care, we solve for this whole, how do we improve patient experience dogma that just makes me nauseated. And the other thing, so it was passing power to people to allow them to be who they aspire to be, and to leverage storytelling to allow that to really light up, because storytelling is such a powerful driver of human effort. And the other thing that you told me that was so impactful is those moments of that you remember that were, I mean, you've had millions of words and exchanges with people over the years, but those things stand out as in your memory for that one sentence of all the cancers that you can pick, this is the one that you would want to have. You go, wow, hope. There's, and how incredibly powerful that is. And there's always something to say, even if it's, you will never be alone on this journey.
Yeah.
We've got you. We care about you. We're together on this. We have an amazing team. Whatever the words are to create that moment to lift. So again, thank you for sharing that. So the other thing I want to ask you, because you're walking the line between patient and experience executive, and as you've seen clinicians that have been in positions of managing very difficult diagnoses. Tell us a little bit, because we've got the context of burnout, despair, disengagement, and exhaustion among care teams, nurses and physicians and APPs alike, and leaders for that matter. What are you seeing in terms of what you would advise in terms of the very personal relationships you develop with your clinicians, in terms of how we treat devastating disease and stay with a wind at our back? I mean, what have you learned as walking the line between clinician and healthcare leader?
One thing that I kind of had like an epiphany, and this only happened, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, when I was sitting down having coffee with a colleague, and we were talking about physician engagement. And we started talking about, well, back up, it's not just physician engagement, it's our clinicians' engagement when you talk about burnout and things. But think about what those clinicians go through every single day. And it's like this roller coaster of emotions. I think about when my oncologist, and my oncologist is phenomenal. He is like one of those people that is just a ray of sunshine and a gift from God for this world. He's one of those people. And when he came to talk to me about my diagnosis, that I went from a stage 2, which is 100% curable, to a stage 3B, he sat down with me as I started to break down. I'm crying. My husband started to cry. And when I asked him, I said, am I going to make it to next Christmas? And he said, I don't know. And of course, like, I started to spin because I can't hear anything that's going on, because all I can think of now is my children. And I don't want them not to know mommy's love. And knowing my oncologist the way that I think I do, he left that room having to bundle up those emotions and keep pressing forward.
Mm-hmm.
Another side of that is, at this clinic, the walls are thin and I'm nosy. So let's take that. I'm nosy. So he was having those conversations with someone else. I couldn't hear him, but I could hear her. And I could hear the pitchness in her voice. I could hear some of the words that she was saying. And this was another day. He was having a conversation with her about mortality. And then 15 minutes later, he came into the room to be with me. He left everything at the door and was 100% present with me. How do you do that? How do you go through these rays of emotion, up and down, go work on the EMR, which takes a whole different level of brain activity, but then still be 100% present for your patients? Like, that's got to be incredibly draining. So the only way that I can think of to make sure to fill that bucket for our physicians and our caregivers, our nurses, anybody that works with patients, is to continue to thank them, tell them what they are doing right. When you tell people what they do right, they tend to do it more, right? And so you alleviate that whack-a-mole and inspire people to do the right thing instead of making them scared to do the wrong.
Well, there's a lot of extraordinary in healthcare, despite all of our burdens, challenges, and difficulties and cost and harm that can sometimes occur as a byproduct of our current state. There are just unbelievable people that make up the clinical body. And, it's interesting, as a clinician, sort of in the trenches for 20 years, there was something not exhausting about making impact. And sometimes it's just the honesty of I don't know about next Christmas, and just that incredibly difficult moment, but being there for patients in a way that is helpful and supportive and sometimes hopeful. always lifted me and gave me energy to carry on. And it was the disconnection and the separation and the isolation and the loneliness that created the exhaustion. So I would imagine, and I'm looking forward to doing some work with your oncologist, as we've spoken about, that his becoming a force for good and a ray of light and hope in what can be a very, very tough specialty is what gets him up every day. And your gratitude for him and patients and teammates' gratitude towards care teams that are making great sacrifice to provide benefit to others really can make a difference. In fact, yesterday, I was talking to my son. It was late yesterday, around 6 o'clock, and I was at the gym. And my wife called me and she said, can you call our son? He's in a tough spot right now. And my kids are not 2 and 6. He's 24 tomorrow. So tomorrow's his birthday. So I called him up, and there's a lot of things happening in his life, graduate school, and he's playing lacrosse, and his roommate and dear friend had some visual difficulties now, is undergoing a brain biopsy, and he's overwhelmed at what that is. And I said, I can't say anything to make the difficulties that you have go away. But what I can tell you is that when you do something important to bring hope to somebody that you care about, sometimes we're the greatest beneficiary. So he went to the hospital and he spent an amazing evening with them, and came back and he said, "No, it was helpful, Dad." One of the few beneficial things you said to me. So anyway, it's one final question. We'll wrap things up. The story that you tell of what it's like for a patient, what really matters to create moments of hope and compassion and to be there for patients, and the leadership guidance of passing power to team and engaging them to actively architect what and who we are, and to release the power to engage people, to create ownership. Those are amazing take-home points that are going to become my way of living. So thank you for that. But what's next for you? It's, you said maybe God put me in this position to be able to make a bigger, broader impact. I would love to know what phase 2 is for Stephanie Abbott, and how you're going to continue to impact the world.
So right now I'm currently writing a book about this experience, wearing that executive hat and that hat as a patient. So I'm hoping that it comes out maybe third quarter. I was hoping second quarter, but it might be more like third. It's a lot harder to write a book than you think. I'm leaving my role as Chief Experience Officer with Adventist Health next month. So and with that, I created my own company, Abbott Solutions. I know, very creative name. So with that, I, as I was going through cancer, and when I got into those dark days, my motto was, I'm going to survive, I'm going to thrive, and I'm going to make a difference in this space. And so that's what I want to do with my company. What I'm going to be focusing on is writing my book, keynote speaking, and consultancy with a focus on consumer strategy. So really helping leaders make it simple for people and processes to act properly, and then really bring value to the organization so that they can grow more through providing them that insight, and then giving them support to really help figure out what those challenges are in their organization, so that we can then create a frictionless experience for the patients we are so privileged to serve. That's what I'm gonna do.
So outside of that, not much else?
No, I know. And 2 kids. And oh, by the way, we're moving back to Florida.
Oh my gosh. Well, you've been to hell and back. And the world can be a beneficiary of what you've been through and what many amazing people have been through. And I think, we always have what I refer to as our darkest teachers that are our toughest moments that make us who we are. And you're a different Stephanie than had you never been through that. And so you will make a big difference wherever you go and whatever you do and however you do it. And just keep telling that story. And when we coach clinicians and care teams on compassion and empathy, I think the take home is envision what it must be like to be that patient in that moment, and allow that to guide what you say and do. And so with that, I think we will close. I'm so grateful for you to take what has taken you to the edge, I'm sure, in terms of, will I be around next Christmas with 2 young kids? I can't even imagine what that's like. And you're going to use that experience to benefit others and patients. So incredibly grateful to you for this. So Stephanie, any other words of wisdom that you want to share with the crew before we sign off on this clinical life?
Anybody that's worried about me, just know that as of November 15th, I'm cancer free. So I am on the road to recovery. I'm healing. I'm going back to the gym. My red blood cells are getting better. So we're good. But I look forward to, partnering probably with many of you as we continue to shape healthcare across the US. So
fantastic. Well, thank you, Stephanie. We're so grateful to you and sharing your story. And that is it. And we are out on this clinical life.